Okay, fantastic. So with that, we'll jump into the book. Today, we are chatting about this collection of short essays, 100 Years Celebration of Women, the 19th Amendment, and the Extraordinary Women of the Estes Valley. This book is a little bit different than something we've read in the past. Most of you are book club returnees. So I'm excited to chat with you about it today. I've got some discussion questions. Of course, if you have any, I would love to hear your thoughts, questions, things like that. So does anybody have any like immediate dying, burning things they want to talk about right at the very beginning, general comments to get things started?
My hand is up.
Yes, Neil.
I was just, is anybody that's here with us today in this book besides my wife?
Me.
Sybil, yeah.
Just me.
And
I did send out a notice to some of the other people who wrote things like Steve Mitchell. I mean, a lot of people that aren't in town anymore. But evidently they had other things to do today. So far, anyway.
That's okay. Yeah, so I know we have some folks who are featured here and then also folks who contributed here. Does anybody want to talk about their experience, kind of either maybe being interviewed or writing about a local woman for the book?
Well, I guess I could start it off. My situation was Pam was 41 years nursing, and she had reached the point where she's having some medical situations that are since resolved, but then along came the pandemic also. And she was getting tired of, just at that age, getting tired of being on her feet 12 and 14 hours a day. And so decided it was time to retire. And when I went to write it up, I ended up with approximately 3 times long what I had to whittle it down to. And the more I think about my submission, the more I think I could write. I could probably use this whole book to fill in all the experiences over the years and so forth. I was not, because it happened during the pandemic, she has not had a retirement ceremony or anything like that. And I was determined that somewhere, somehow, she was going to be recognized for all the things she went through for 41 years. It's taking care of premature infants and dealing with their parents and so forth for 41 years was just unbelievable. Some of the things she went through, good and bad. And of course, not all her patients came through, and the way she dealt with it and the way the whole family dealt with it and so forth over the years just had to be recognized. So here she is. So there I am.
I guess I should, Neil, you bring up a good point. I should back up just a little bit. This book came out during the 100th anniversary, obviously, of women's suffrage in the United States. But of course, other things were happening in 2020. So this book was we had, so many community events, I guess, planned. But then this book really became one of the main ways to celebrate local women because of the pandemic in 2020. So yeah, this was a great way to recognize folks like Pam who maybe we couldn't get together to recognize in a certain way because of what was going on at the time. So this was a great kind of way to celebrate even during a pandemic. So I thought I'd give a little context for the book, I guess. Anybody else want to speak to their experience about either writing or being written about?
Well, we're always so shy in these meetings, Michaela.
Go for it, Sybil.
2 things. Yeah, 2 things that I think are important about this book. History is written by the victors or whoever's in charge. So that's what was a good thing about this project, that there were people who were recognized that a lot of people didn't know anything about, a lot of women from the beginning of the 20th century, and then slightly before, including Isabella. And then people that we didn't really know anything about that have maybe not lived in Estes Park that long a time. I go to old timers on the 2nd and 4th Saturdays. And one of the questions that came up about that this last time, was what's the difference between history and invasion of privacy? So that's always a question. Like, as old, we don't have anything about people that we weren't alive at the same time that they're alive. So we don't really know what they were thinking or doing from their point of view. We just know what we think they were thinking about. And as time goes on, as Derek and Jim and everybody else talk about, the future becomes the past pretty quickly. So I think that's the real value of this book. I was sort of hoping that Kent would be here. I know that they published at least 200 copies, printed 200 copies of this. And I think they still have some at McDonald Bookshop. I don't think they've put any over in the museum shop yet.
We do. Yep. We have them at the museum.
Oh, okay.
I mean, not many anymore. I think maybe about 6 copies or so, but we if you're dying and you don't have a copy yet.
Yeah.
Michaela,
Yeah, Joan.
it might be a good time for me to introduce myself. As you
Sure.
can see, I am a historian. I moved to Erie, Colorado, Boulder area, 3 years ago. My PhD was on Florence E. Allen, and she was the first woman, arguably she should have been the first judge on the Supreme Court. She was friends with Eleanor Roosevelt, and FDR appointed her to the Circuit Court of Appeals, making her the first judge on the Circuit Court. And as you can see, she built what was the name? It's in Moraine. It's one of the cottages there. And I left a note on her cottage. It was 100, I'd have to look at my other notes, but you can see that I have the photographs from.
Joan, can you show us what the date on that is?
Sure,
we can't quite see it.
She lent it out to a lawyer who worked for her, and they drove she would drive from Cleveland in a Ford Model T every summer, and she vacationed there, and she owned that cottage from 1921 to 1956. And a man named, I think Oliver Green was the architect. And these are pictures from that summer that they vacationed. Here's a scene on a postcard, scene on Bear Lake. And I've got multiple photographs of when they were at the west side of the cottage. I'm sorry that you're not going to get a good view. Here's July, winter and summer, Falls River Park, Ranger's Cabin, Grand Lake, multiple pictures of them. And her partner would trout fish. Right, the lake ran right in front of their cottage. The cottage still exists, and ironically, I was studying her before Google, Florence. So she had diaries. She kept diaries every day. And when she went to Estes Park, of course, that was in there. Her name was Florence E. Allen, and I found her. Again, I found Estes Park, and I come every Wednesday for an appointment to Estes Park. So ironically, here I am with Florence. Here's some of them at the tourist cottage. But these are the original photographs taken by these women who vacationed at her cottage one summer from June 28th, 1931 to July 30th, 1931. Of course, and I have Florence talking about her and her partner who lived in the cottage. And I found her name, I think in one of the journal entries. There's a book on the journals. Do you know who I mean? He wrote and then his daughter published, but she's mentioned in it. But I have been super interested in finding this. As a historian, as you can imagine, historians are very curious. So I find that interesting about your question. Was it Sybil who asked that question that you talked about?
Privacy.
Right. Are you, I'm sorry, I don't know your names, but anyhow, these are the original and intact, and I have the plastic bags that they have been kept for however many years, 80 years. So
well, Joan, where did you get those? Did you get those from a family member or were they in an archive?
I didn't know. I got it from a family member. What happened is, as all good historians pre-Google, you do the search. And I followed the trail from the Franklin Delano. I had fellowships at the Franklin Delano Roosevelt Library in Hyde Park. I had fellowships at the Library of Congress and all over the United States following her trail. And I wrote my dissertation on Florence Allen. And then this was a side interest of mine. And then what coincidentally, I didn't come here to Colorado to follow Florence until I die. It just so happened that here I am. So somewhere in the orbit upstairs, Florence is watching me. And so of course, I knew enough about her cottage. And one of the things I've wanted to do is to go to Fort Collins to look at the deeds. But she built this in 1921, her cottage, and it exists. If you go into Moraine Park and down, and you make a left, it's the very last cottage on the left on Moraine Road, but it's not the road that it was called. It was 100 something else. But so that's why I've been very interested. I joined the museum pre-COVID. And so I've been wanting to meet you all and to share what I have about her. So she's the generation. She was also a suffragist. And she worked at New York City, her law degrees from NYU. And she really precedes, all these women judges and lawyers. And she vacationed every summer in Estes Park. And so my query as a historian is, what brought her from Cleveland, Ohio, traveling by Model T all the way to Colorado, all those summers? And then I have photographs.
That's a great story, Joan. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Yeah, I don't want to monopolize it, but I wanted to at least let you know that I'm very interested in the history, and I have a primary source, a primary documentation of the summers and pictures from 1931.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And what a great connection to today's topic. Yeah, Neil.
I'm confused about your directions about where the cottage still is.
Okay, Neil,
go ahead.
You go as you're going to, if you take the route to Bear Lake.
Right, Bear Lake, okay.
Right on the right there, in Moraine, across from, there's, I thought it was
Moraine Park Lodge, or the Discovery Center, it's called now.
That's correct. And you make a right, you go over the bridge there. In the wintertime, it's closed. You go down and you make a left, and it's really rocky. It's hard to get to. And it's the very last one on the left. Now, a person named Stock Hope or Stock something, because I looked at the mailboxes. you know, oh, I've had a great time. I started this research in 1990. That's how many years I've been following Florence. And I walked down there and I left a note in the door. And he contacted me and left me his phone number and email. And that's in a different set of my notes. But yeah, it's the same cottage. And one of the things I've been wanting to do is to go to Fort Collins to look at the deeds of transfer, because she built it and then she sold it in 1950s. And do you know which one I mean, Neil? You can, it's way at the end. You go down and you make the left.
Okay, in my mind, I have the Discovery thing up on the hill with the parking lot and everything.
Right.
And I'm going straight on Bear Creek Road, and it would be on the left up the hill on the left side.
Right, right.
That's right. Okay, I know exactly the one you're talking about. Okay, interesting.
And it was 100, they had another name for it, and I have it, again, in my other notes, I don't have them right with me. I should have had them with you. But there was a name, oh, I forget it. Callie, no, something. If it might begin with a K, I don't know. But
Kaley cottages.
Yes,
Kaley, K-A-L-E-Y. Which are to the west of where her cabin was.
Right.
And
100.
Yeah.
100 Kaley. That was exactly right, Sybil. Thank you.
Boy, I'm having the same problem you have. Don't you hate it when you get in a crowd and you can't remember names?
I know. Aging sucks. But
yes.
Not for the sissies. Not for the sissies. You can Google her. Her name is Florence Ellenwood Allen, A-L-L-E-N, from Ohio, but she gained national fame by being appointed by FDR on the suggestion of ER, Eleanor Roosevelt, to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. And she was very influential in TVA decisions and all kinds of things. And her name came up on 12 different occasions. Of course, by the time it was doing that, we were in the 50s with McCarthy. So that didn't pan out so well for her.
Where is the Sixth Court? Where is it located?
Cincinnati, but it includes Michigan, Kentucky. She was the TVA. So Michigan, Kentucky, and you'd have to look, Neil.
Tennessee and so forth. Yeah. Okay. No worries. Huh.
Well, Joan, thank you so much for sharing your research with us and Florence's story. Well, I definitely have some Googling ahead of me. That's for sure.
And I can give you my information. I do belong, Michaela, to the museum. So
perfect.
My last name is Organ, O-R-G-A-N.
Okay. Perfect. Then I should have your info, Joan. So I'll be reaching out for sure.
Thank you. And I don't want to dominate, but I did want to bring
I was the librarian at the park. It was a very part-time position, but I was there for almost 20 years. And there are several books that may be of interest and send it to you, because there's been a lot of research about the Moraine Park community and the people that lived there, William Allen White, and that other really famous judge whose name escapes me at the moment right now. Anyway, and to your question about why anybody would come from Ohio, drive all the way out here, Yellowstone and Estes Park, Rocky Mountain National Park, were the primary places for people to escape.
Right. That's what I thought.
The first 10 national parks, everybody wanted to come to the West.
I thought that because part of my work is that it was a safe place for, quote, never married women to vacation together and to explore the West. So, and they were fishers and rock, they climbed. hiked. They did all of that. And I have some great pictures of Florence doing that. And she would sketch too, where she climbed that day, you know. So anyhow, I'm there, Sybil, every Wednesday. In fact, I'll be there next Wednesday. The only reason why I'm not there today is because I wanted to Zoom. My appointment's at 9 and I was like, oh, you know, I was too worried to get back. I wouldn't get back, so.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Joan.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Joan, do you know what year the, did you say Model T or Model A?
It was a Model T.
Model T. Do you know about what year it was? Would have been,
in the early 20s, 20, something like that. She called it Gypsy.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to interject that when I was growing up in Galesburg, Illinois, I had a friend who had 2 older sisters and an older brother. And all 3 of those used their 1929 Model A to travel from Galesburg, Illinois to Ames, Iowa to go to college. Yep. That car was their car for 12 years. Yeah. And then inherited. And he used it for 2 years in high school and 4 years in college. Yep. And they ended up selling, the family ended up selling that car when their dad passed away for, I think it was $23,000. Wow. We're talking middle 1970s money. Right, right. It's quite a historic car all around Galesburg, Illinois, but they were very durable cars. If you change they were.
Yeah. She used that. She lived in Cleveland, but she had a place, of course, in Cincinnati when she was the circuit court, and she traveled back and forth from Cleveland all the time. Mm-hmm. Huh. Let's see, Sybil.
Yeah.
Sybil, yeah. Were you at the meeting last night when they let our superintendent go? I don't remember.
No, I don't have any kids in school, and I don't really know anything about that. I think it was an interesting, there again, that may have something to do with questions of privacy. I guess they have a non-disclosure agreement about whether anybody can talk about it or not. I don't know why they put it in the middle of the year.
Neil, we're going to come back to the book if that's okay.
Well, that's what I was coming up to.
Okay. I don't know. Okay.
I see Ruby Bode, B-O-D-E.
Ruby Bode. I was going to say, is she in the book?
She is.
Yes.
She's mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought so.
She is going to be the interim superintendent.
Awesome. We just read about Ruby. Actually, Neil, that brings me to one of our discussion questions. I have further down the list, but this might be a good time for it. So we read, of course, about so many women in this book, but many of them featured, I noticed, I don't know if you did as well, were either teachers, they were involved with the school, or if they were in formal education, they were certainly serving in mentor roles. Do you think mentorship, to the group, do you think mentorship is a very important, I mean, clearly I do, just from the way I'm phrasing this question, but do you think mentorship is important to Estes Park? And if you do, why?
Communication.
Not everybody at once.
Yeah, communication. I assume that everybody that was a teacher, they're wired to know certain things and so forth, and they were able to communicate with each other very well. It's very important to have a mentor because you're new in town, but you know the right questions. Whenever teachers get together, and I saw this all the time when I was at Gilpin County, that they speak a special language. I call it teacher speak. And that's very important as far as who do you buy groceries from in town and stuff like that. I don't know if that's what you're asking, but that's something I've noticed about when teachers get together. They just kind of gravitate toward each other, and they have that same caring, learning personality, for want of a better description, which I admire very much.
Yeah, anybody else? Why is mentorship important, particularly in a small community, maybe like Estes Park?
Kayla.
Gail and I are just
Chrissy.
condemned to, oh, good. Go ahead, Chrissy.
I think mentorship is just important in general, whether it's small, but it can be more effective, I think, in smaller communities. But I think mentorship is really important when it comes to people who maybe haven't had opportunities like women in the past and disadvantaged communities. And, we're even today, with the recent appointment of the Supreme Court judge. So I think in general, mentorship, and I think more people if they have opportunities to step up and be mentors, is good. And you can be a mentor and a mentee at the same time.
Absolutely. Sybil, did you have something?
Well, I was just going to say, I don't know in a small town if it's really mentorship. It's a little bit more acceptance. And I think teachers are more easily accepted in a lot of ways. They know your kids, they know the other teachers, they know the school board. I think that's the important thing, like for the women in the early part of this book, or in the early years of Estes Park, it was the fact that a lot of them belonged to a women's club, or their husbands had businesses so they were involved. And because there was just a small group, we forget, there's 4 million people here in the summertime, and we think, whoa, this is a big town. I thought in the thing about the recent election, they said there were 6,000 registered voters. That's a tiny, tiny town.
4,000, Chrissy?
Yeah, it's actually closer to 4,000 because, of course, you have age range with voting that kids can't vote.
Well, right. But I've thought that the population is about 10,000, and that's counting like Carriage Hills, that's counting the outlying areas. That's not just the town of Estes Park. So, I think we really have to think about that a lot. And then I agree with Christy very much that mentoring is so important. And I don't think a lot of us know enough about how to do it, or that whatever little bit of something we offer somebody else might be the thing that changes their position in the town, or their life, or how they get along with whatever it is. Just saying sometimes that somebody, or that you're friends with somebody, may change somebody's opinion about that person, either for good or for bad. When they started this project, back to the book, it started as articles in the newspaper, as just something to fill the newspaper up. And just to recognize that women are important. I think I'm in the second wave of feminism, that we were all thinking by this time, by 2022, women would be running the world. And unfortunately, they're not yet, though they've been making a lot of strides. So.
Absolutely. Cinda, did you have something?
I do. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. I come from a very small town. Coincidentally, 10,000 people was the population 50 years ago, and it's still the population. And I had the opportunity, after I got out of grade school, to be sent away to live with my older sister in Colorado. And I met a couple of her friends there who were teachers. It happened to be in Greeley. But I'm all for mentorship, because these two young teachers kind of took me under their wing. I had free time, even though it was school year. I finished my lessons early. And they opened my mind to so many things that I hadn't ever known about before. And I think that in a small town, people are so focused on day to day that oftentimes they don't have that opportunity to see other possibilities. In Estes, that might be different, because you have so many people come in as tourists, and there would be shopkeepers and these out-of-towners and locals and out-of-towners, that other things might come up. But as far as children, it takes a special kind of mentor to really engage a child. And I think that mentors are good for adults, but I think they're especially good for children. That's all I have to say.
Excellent. Anybody else on mentorship?
I just, if we got, let's see, what time is it? 20, we got time. I just have story after story of Pam's dealing with parents and so forth. And one that she and I talk about all the time that we really remember fondly, I think it was 1988 or 89. She had a African-American woman who had triplets, 2 girls and a boy. And they always had, the hospitals, when these neonatal units, they have reunions every 3, 5, 10, 15 years. And to go to those and see the pictures of the babies, and then at age 3 and age 5. And I went to her 5-year, and this African-American woman showed up with 2 daughters. The boy didn't make it 3 years of age. And then they came back. I wasn't there, but they came back at age 15. The girls were age 15. Pam took a couple of pictures and so forth, just the cutest kids. And Pam wasn't at the reunion. She was working that day. And here came one of her nurses with these 2 teenage girls. And of course, Pam didn't recognize her first when they told her who she was. Oh my gosh, And so Pam spent the afternoon taking them around her unit, actually visiting with the parents that came in. She showed them computer. They were just starting to do computer. All the medical places have national computer records now and so forth. She showed them how to input stuff and so forth. And I think it's been about 10 years or so ago, she got a Christmas card from both of the daughters. One is a neonatal nurse in Houston, and the other was in San Antonio. They both got master's degrees, just like Pam has in neonatology. And I could go on, and I like to say I could fill a book the size of this book with all the stories of reunions and parents' gratefulness and so forth. But that really, and the one thing that really stood out in the 15-year meeting was the 2 girls told Pam that their mother constantly reminded them that there are good white people out there. And if you meet them, and if you find them, treasure them, because they open doors for you that unfortunately sometimes African Americans don't have. So that's my.
So Pam was serving as a mentor from like really day 1 for these girls, yeah.
Not just he mentored literally hundreds of student nurses coming through the 3 hospitals she worked at. He was always the one everybody recommended to do mentoring.
That's a great story. Thanks, Neil. So this kind of leads into another question that we've touched on a little bit already, but they're in this book, or collection, I guess, of essays. There are both historic and contemporary women featured. Why do you think it's important to feature both women like Pam, who are still around today, and then women like Isabella Bird? Why do you think it's important that both of those, that everybody kind of throughout time be featured?
I think, I'll just be brief. I'll try to be brief on this one. I think all girls, female girls, at about the 6th grade, this should be required reading. It shows the history of the present day built on the shoulders of the ones in the past, and shows them that there are opportunities. That's my take on it. I just think that 6th grade girls should be required to read this.
Well, what about 6th grade boys, Neil?
They don't matter. They've got,
they're not going to read that anyway. Is that what you're going to say?
they've got,
Sybil, good comment.
I think I just mentioned earlier that, history is written by the victors, and I'm just happy that even if it's only 200 words at a time, there are women. And I think a lot of what this book does is show to people that somebody, your neighbor or your teacher or someone who used to be on the town board or is currently on the town board has a life, and that their life is productive. And that those people are people that you might want to get to know in some way. That's why I appreciate about the contemporary women that are in this. I also appreciate a lot of the historic women, because they were the ones who pretty much kept the town running. You know, you think about somebody like Josie Hupp or EMA Foote. They were the business people. Mrs. McDonald, who owned, you know, the bookstore while her husband was running the hardware store. They started this town. And I think sometimes we forget that. We go, oh, all the women I know are waitresses, or all the women I know are maids. Well, no, that's not just what they are. So
your point is well taken, Sybil.
I'm really glad that I contributed. I'm glad I contributed to this book, you know, from the people that I knew from my experiences growing up here and being a librarian, both for the park and for the town. And so that everybody has a voice somehow. Did I get wiped out somehow? I think
cutting out pretty bad.
Yeah, I think they're working on the internet in this where I am, so that's could be bad. Anyway, I think I've said enough. I'd like to hear something from Gretchen or Christy, or more from Joan.
Well, this is Gretchen, and I grew up hiking in Estes Park. My grandma had volunteered at the museum and had spent all of her summers up there since she was born in 1914. And as I read this book, a lot of names came back into my memory that she talked about, or I might have met when I was up there a couple times. And as I read this, I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea so many women had such prominent positions and did so many great things civically, educationally, socially, everything. It was like, I think Estes Park really was brought forth by a lot of work that the women did. It just blew me away. I was just like, holy cow. I was really amazed how they were, you know, you always hear about all the guys and everything that they do, but it's like these women really did things, and people in there that I had no idea that they did that. And there are so many people like you ladies involved in so many of the clubs, the organizations. It's like, holy cow, that is a lot of work, and it became quite evident. And I was kind of taken aback that there were so many. Very well put together.
Yeah, absolutely. Did someone, I know I certainly did, especially reading about contemporary women. Did you learn something about someone you already know?
I did. Somebody that my grandma talked about, a couple of people that I had met probably when she was at the museum and they had been in there. I was like, oh, and Sybil, I recognized your name. I'm not sure if I met you when I was a kid or whatever, but I do recognize that name. And there were some other ones I went, oh my gosh. And I thought to myself, I should have listened more when Grandma was telling me about these people. So I was not a good mentoree at that age.
Yeah, did anybody else learn anything about someone they knew or know currently?
Well, I thought it was, this is Ann Wise, and I'm sorry, my camera wouldn't work for the first half hour for some mysterious reason, but I thought it was interesting about Wendy Koenig. I didn't know that, I knew she'd been a runner and an athlete and like that back in college. But what I thought was very sad, though I absolutely believe it because we're about the same age, is that her scholarship was taken away. She was given a scholarship, right, for her athleticism.
Yeah.
And it was given to a young man instead. And she was only given a small grant instead. I would like to know more about that, but I absolutely believe it because I'm a distance runner too. And I remember that period where, you know, there was all that fighting about women trying to run half marathons, which I run all the time now, and marathons. And in fact, I met the woman that ran. In fact, she was at a race I finished and was on podium, and she was there who ran the first, when she was registered and finished the first marathon. And it made me think about that. But the fact that they took away her scholarship, it didn't elaborate and say why, but the implication was it was because they decided to give it to a man instead. Why couldn't they have made room for this accomplished woman to have a scholarship? She had all this outstanding ability. And I didn't know that, and that made me feel a little, I've met her a few times, but it made me feel a little bit like I could relate to her situation more, because I saw that happen growing up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing it. Yeah, I think there's that one kind of famous photo, right, of that woman trying to finish. I can't remember if it was the Boston Marathon.
I met her.
And people are like grabbing her, like trying to stop her running.
And you know what happened? Her boyfriend, who was running with her at the time, was like a tackle for the football team, and he tackled the race director, who was trying to physically yank her off the street, and he tackled her. And then other members of the men's football team who were running the race, who supported her, sort of surrounded her and kept her from being attacked anymore. That happened.
That's crazy.
That's great. Huh.
Gretchen, sorry, did you have your hand up?
I don't think so.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
I noticed a couple of the gals who had an interest in being a naturalist or knew the flora and fauna were kind of discouraged, saying that you wouldn't be, this would be better suited for a man. And a couple of them kept on going and went through it, and they probably outshined anybody else that could have done that stuff. So I was amazed about people. I was so shocked to hear that man would say, well, that wouldn't be a job for you.
Yeah, flowers is something women should not be studying or teaching people about. Flowers?
Yeah. And climbing 14ers and climbing all the mountains and identifying everything. It's like, holy smokes. Thank goodness they persevered.
Yeah, absolutely. So another one of my questions is,
okay,
Neil.
Neil, let me interject just a second. I've got about 6 in here that I learned more about, but I'll just pick out 2. Kathy Littlejohn. Kathy, the first year that I did the car show, we were looking for volunteers and everything, and her name came up, and so I emailed her and said, I don't know you, but can you help me with the car show? And she was, every year, she's a very gracious person. I didn't know all this. It figures from the few chances I've had to meet her that all these things happen. And then Kathy Brazelton, I was doing green Jeep tours, and I'd met her a couple of times and talked with her and found out she was doing this and that and so forth. And I just happened to be watching Channel 9 last night at 6 o'clock, Kyle Clark, and Kyle Clark, their team interviewed her. She's retiring. And she's still going to volunteer in the park and so forth. But I didn't know she had been to Florissant, and she'd worked at the Grand Canyon and so forth. And I was glad to see all that. And when she stopped me one day, I had the Jeep. I had 6 customers in my Jeep, and I was at the alluvial fan. And I'm walking up to show them the water coming down and everything, and she stopped me. I think it was like the second time I'd met her. She didn't remember me, but I remembered her. And there's a card we're supposed to carry. And I gave her the card and so forth. She was very gracious, and she spent about 10 minutes talking to the customers about this and that and alluvial fan and rock formations and all that. And I finally remember her as a great person, perfect person for the job that she's had. Absolutely perfect. So that's what I wanted. I had to especially mention Kathy.
Sure thing. So we know.
I had a great interview on Channel 9 with her. It lasted about 5 minutes, which is a long time on a half-hour program.
Mm-hmm. Excuse me for interrupting again, but it was a very good interview, and she has spent her entire life as a ranger for the National Park Service. And one park or another, but a lot of it at Rocky. And she says, oh, what is she going to do after she retires? She's just going to be a docent in the park service.
VIP. Yeah.
That's great. So she still has some work ahead of her. So we've mentioned so many amazing women. What do you think some are the characteristics that they share? We've talked about people who persevere and folks who are passionate about things. What other characteristics do you think women of this book share?
Very opposite of wallflowers. Educated beyond what opportunities were available for them. The way back when people.
I think they're very sharing people and caring people, because they want others to enjoy the things they enjoy, or at least be aware of the things that they enjoy.
You have to be extremely determined, whether it's climbing Logs Peak or opening the first whatever shop, and then continuing through harsh winters when you're homesteading. To be extremely determined, like nothing stops you.
And also strong and or stubborn, which comes in handy.
I just like to even give you an Ohioan. My mom was one of the first Wasps during World War II. And I learned a lot. And if you go in, I was in Boulder not too long ago. My sister was visiting from Columbus. And we took her to Hazel's liquor store. And on the wall on Hazel's, I don't know if you've been in there, but there are photographs of women pilots. And one of them, which hangs in the Smithsonian, by the way, 4 women. The second one on the left was my mother's best friend. And she mentored or got my mother into being a Wasp. My grandmother had a fit, but anyhow, so there were lots of, they grew up in a farm town at the time called Boardman, Ohio, which is outside of Youngstown. But yeah, I watched my mom and I listened to all her stories about becoming a Wasp, a women air specialist. And they flew the Big B, the dangerous planes that the men didn't fly. They, ferried back and forth products. Mm-hmm. So that's just an aside.
B-24. B-24.
Yeah, is that what it was? My dad was a pilot in the Navy and flew night flights in the Pacific off the Richard Bonhoeffer ship. So that's what I grew up listening to, and them fighting over who was the better pilot.
I'm an amateur aviation historian, especially naval historian. I think I know the picture. I think I know the picture you're talking about.
She's the second on my mom's best.
Yeah, I'll have to look at my references. That's a great story.
Her name is Peg Kirshner.
Yes, I recognize the name. Yeah. Oh my goodness, that was your mother.
That was my mom's best friend, and they went to Youngstown College together. And this is another anecdotal thing. She was the whatever they do for the Queen. She was the Queen. My mother was her attendant, but they were best friends and they flew together.
Oh my gosh. Huh. Yeah, they probably were ferrying either the 4-engine B-24.
The B, is that a big one?
Yes, 4-engine. Mm-hmm. It has what's called a Davis wing, and it doesn't hold formation very well and so forth. So I'm digressing.
Yeah, and I am too. I just wanted, I just wanted my own growing up with, you know, that kind of, my mom was born, both my parents were born in 1922.
So.
Well,
Yeah, the wasp is quite a story. There are stories legion about wasps who are ferrying a plane, and here comes a hot-shot male pilot to get on her tail, and within 3 turns, she's on his tail.
Yep, exactly.
And
that's the kind of story that I grew up with.
Wow. Huh.
Joan, it sounds like your dinner table had many characteristics of the women in this book, right?
Yeah, yes.
All right. So I've got a couple of questions. Oh, sorry, Anne. Yeah.
I have a question. It's one you haven't asked exactly, but you might be going to. But I wanted to know the answer to this, and it's about Margaret Fuller Booth. And this is the part that I think is the most interesting. Of course, I thought it was very interesting that she helped establish the geology department at the University of Denver. I think that's fabulous. I've always been fascinated by geology, though I never went into that line of work, but I always really liked geology classes. But what I don't know is this, that there's a mountain called Peggy's Peak after her. Does anybody know where that is? Because the writer was Gillian Maxwell, and I've never heard of Peggy's Peak. Of course, I don't know every peak around here, but where is that?
I was wondering the same thing.
Okay, well, nobody knows. Well, I know some of you, know lots of people who, I guess I'll ask some of my trail trekker friends if they know where Peggy's Peak is. It may not be in Estes, it may not be in Rocky Mountain. So, because they said she was at University of Denver. So, but it doesn't, it implies that it was in Estes Park, but it doesn't say that specifically, but it does imply it would be right around here. I never heard of it.
Did you Google it, Anne? Have you
No,
Googled?
because there's
too many.
There's too many erroneous things I have learned. And actually, this brings me to a separate topic that I was going to. I don't know why like I said, my camera's not working exactly right. The color's going in and out. But they have hardly any peaks named after women around here, or anywhere in Colorado. Very few. And some of them are named after men who had no connection to here, other than that they were the surveyor. Like they went up there and they did put up the equipment, surveyed, and they named it after themselves. And then they left and they were never here again. Or we have named after men who've never set foot in Colorado, and there's all these women in this book, who, see, the camera's not working, who are doing wonderful things. And some of these women ought to have their names on some of the peaks around here. They're named after men who had no connection to Estes Park. And I wish we could somehow get that going, have some things renamed. But there's very few, very few.
Do you know who, I agree with you.
Yeah, I think you. Your camera is like.
Yeah, Neil, we're looking at your ceiling.
Top of your head and your foot, okay.
Marlene Borneman would be able to answer that question right away.
All right.
I don't know. Do you know who she is?
I've heard of her. She's
Marlene. Her husband is Walter Borneman. He's a local. His book.
Yeah.
Why you?
I'm sorry. Marlene has a life of her own, and she's written a lot of wildflower books. And I maybe Walt is a better known name, but I think Marlene is huge in the hiking and climbing community around here. I would like to say about Peggy's Peak, I did know Margaret Fuller Booth when I was a child, but I don't know where Peggy's Peak is because I'm not a big hiker, climber. I just think this is a good time to be thinking about renaming stuff. We're trying to get rid of Mount Evans and the men that were instrumental in a lot of terrible things. So maybe, Anne, you should bring this up to the State Geographical Board.
Yeah,
and try to get something like that going on.
Yeah, and of course they had these horrible, like it doesn't count to name after women to call it Squaw Mountain. I mean, for heaven's sakes. Though at the time that wasn't considered bad, but
right.
Yeah,
they are finally changing.
Yeah, they are. They've
Larry
voted that they're renaming, like I forgot how many 70 peaks or something like that. I don't remember the exact number, but yeah. Yeah, they did. Been watching those stories. But they should be named after all. Like I said, we've got a bunch of them, maybe not 100, but a good 30 in here, historical women, because I do prefer the idea of naming after people who are past, you know, not current alive, because
emailing her.
You know, you can be more sure of their legacy, you know.
Well, and then that brings up a question from me, like, how important is it for people to have a legacy, like outside of their family? This kind of gets back to that whole issue of privacy or whatever. Like, it seems to me, doing historical research a lot of the time, nobody cares about anything until the people that could tell you something are gone.
It's not working.
And Jim Pickering has mentioned that, you know, you don't want to do really contemporary history because those people don't want to tell you stuff
Gives you any options
that they may or may not want to share with people. So it gets back to the other thing that was associated with this book was the Women's Monument downtown.
Down there.
And there are, you know, 10 little sculptures downtown. And do people actually stop and look at that? Or do they just go, oh, look, women sitting there?
Sybil, I want to follow up on your question about legacy. I think that's a great question. Do you think many of these women in this book were aware that they were leaving a legacy at all? Or do you think that was a motivation for them? Or does anybody have any thoughts on legacy?
I think very few women actually think about legacy. I think maybe Eleanor Roosevelt did, but I couldn't name a lot of other women. I think Judge Ketanji Brown, who is just gone the Supreme Court. I think those women that have been on the Supreme Court, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I think a lot of them, I don't think women have been allowed to think that they're creating a legacy. I think women are mostly involved with, I got to get these things done. I need to help my community. I need to help my family. And if something good comes of that, that's wonderful. Whereas I think men have been taught a lot of times to say, oh, if you do this, you're going to be famous. You're going to be in a book. I don't think very many women have thought about that they should be in a book.
And also until my generation and later parts of my generation, women were taught that you were associated with your husband. And so your name, actually, you're required to be called Mrs. John Smith. You are not, and you know, it had to be your husband's name.
With you all, I would disagree with you all. This is not the way women, if you study early 20th century, they were clearly, and Florence was a great example, and Eleanor Roosevelt, even though she was attached. And this is what my work is in. So, and I did it pre-Google, so I've actually read letters. Women were concerned about what they were doing. They were not attached to men, the women that I studied. And so I would encourage you to look around earlier. This is not, you know, women were very strong and very committed to who they were, what they were doing, and their part. So, you know, I'm a historian and I study social policy. And so that's what my doctorate's in. And I would encourage you to rethink and reach beyond that assumption.
So we could have a mixed bag, right? Some women were working very specifically thinking about legacy, and maybe others were not.
Well, yeah,
absolutely. So kind of talking to back up just a little bit in time, I guess. So we talk about the 100th anniversary, obviously, of the 19th Amendment that passed in 1920, but Colorado women were given the right to vote in 1893. So there's a big time frame, right? between Colorado women having the right to vote and, you know, at the state level. And subsequently kind of, that's the time that Estes Park is really kind of up and coming. It's really getting settled, things like that. How do you think either that state legislation, how do you think that shaped women's, and we've talked a lot about these early women entrepreneurs in Estes Park, how do you think that has shaped them? And then maybe subsequently our community? Was that a clear question?
I have a question to follow up on your statement, which I think is a good one. But as you correctly pointed out, this was a state law affecting state elections, and the 1920 amendment was federal elections. But there were also local elections, and maybe I'm wrong about this, and maybe one of you historians, you know, because this is supposed to be a discussion of history too. I believe that the localities had to pass their own laws. But I'm not certain about this, about whether women could vote in local elections. So was that correct in Colorado? And did Estes Park have its own law that allowed women to vote in local elections, like for municipal elections? Or does anybody know?
That is a great question, Anne. I will just, to kind of frame this a little bit more, I will say that the town of Estes Park was not incorporated until 1917. So the town as like a structure was like really kind of late on that end of things. But I'm not sure about local ordinances or anything like that. Does anybody
Or
know?
county.
Or county, yeah, at the county level, Larimer County.
Does anybody know? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, that's a great question.
That's a great question.
Ask the clerk's office. They'd know.
Well, I'm asking the museum staff.
I know, which we just received some documents from the clerk's office. So we are working our way through those. So maybe I will be able to answer your question very soon. But I know some of them are digitized, some of these early town ordinances and things like that, and you can find them. I'll just shout out the clerk's office webpage and the public records portal there. I know they have a lot of digitized documents. So if anybody wants to dive in further, that's an option for sure for research. But yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure. Does anyone know, just kind of generally in Colorado, was that up to municipalities or was it a state kind of overarching state thing? And you've stumped us.
Well, it could have been in the 1917, what do you call the original documents that created the town?
Like the charter, kind of?
The charter, whatever they called it then. It might be written in there if it were allowed.
Sure. Yeah, we'll have to look at that a little bit further. That's a great question. We'll get back to you on that one.
Post that on, a throwback Thursday or something when we find out.
Yeah, we'll see what we can find and then throw it up on our Facebook page.
Because it would be fun if the town of Estes Park also predated the national legislation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it wouldn't be by very long, but it would definitely, be there. That's for sure. Interesting. All right. So I think I've got one more question for us. And then we'll wrap things up here. We've had a great discussion this morning. Thank you all so much for being here. Neil, you want to mute yourself?
Peggy's Peak.
Neil?
Pardon?
Never mind. I got it. So sorry, one of my last questions. So of course, we've talked about so many women this morning who were involved in various community organizations, like we've mentioned, Women's Club. We have a ton of local Rotary, all kinds of local organizations. Why do you think kind of this grassroots, and this might be kind of specific to Estes Park, maybe not. Why do you think this grassroots work was and has been so impactful?
So like what all the women did, why that?
Yeah, like why have these kind of, like Women's Club has been around now for 110 years.
Mhm.
Why do you think, I mean, and that's again specific to Estes Park, Gretchen, but why do you think these kind of grassroots local organizations have been able to maintain such, for over a century in some cases, and the work that they've done clearly we continue to see kind of the fruit that it bears today. Why do you think it's so successful?
They were probably acting as mentors to the successive generations, kind of passing it down to friends, their kids.
Sure.
The people that might have visited Estes Park, they see how involved women were in the running of the town. They probably went, this is cool. So when they retired up there, they're like, I want to be a part of that. And they saw that it could be done.
Yeah, so going back to that idea of mentorship.
I think too, it was determination. They saw a need for something and they went ahead and worked at it until they could get things done. Actually, even a lot of the National Park Service parks were created because women saw the need to preserve nature as a place for fulfillment and renewal. Probably people like the judge who wanted to come and spend her vacation away from the hubbub of the city, all that kind of thing. So the house where I staying for the winter has a poster on the wall that says, "Get her done." And I think maybe that was what a lot of women have as their motto, get her done somehow.
They get it all done.
Yeah.
Yeah, anybody else? Why?
I just like to say one other thing about the book, Michaela, that my favorite page in this book is the last page, process, and how Jenna Griswold, who grew up here, is now the Secretary of State for Colorado. So there again, we look around town and think, yeah, it's just a bunch of, retired people or kids that want to get out of here. But a lot of people have gone on to good things. Estes Park.
Michaela, I think Estes Park is unique in its strong nonprofit culture. And when I've been in meetings with other communities, even surrounding Grand County, Gilpin County, Clear Creek County, Lyons, and Netherland is a group that I was involved in. They're kind of shocked at the nonprofit culture that we have here. And I think that strong culture supports nonprofits and the Women's Club. I mean, they just have done so much that, they are, they're almost a staple of Estes Park, I think, because they were so insightful in not only the town stuff, but also Rocky Mountain National Park. So I think Estes Park has a lot to be proud of when it comes to the nonprofit community. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Christy. All right, guys, does anybody want to add anything final? Was there a particular woman that you really wanted to talk about and you didn't get a chance yet? Anything else you want to add towards the end? Anybody? Neil, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Good. Never mind. I got it. Thanks, Pam. Peggy Peak. Elevation 11,931 feet. Mount Zirkle Wilderness. And I think that's, I don't remember if it's southwest or northwest.
Could you say that again? Mount what?
Mount Zirkle, Zirkel, Wilderness. Route National Forest.
Oh, okay. En route. Okay, en route. Okay.
Route National Forest is, I can't read.
It's a circle. Anyway, that's great. I could find it. I could probably find it from there also by calling the National Forest for route, you know, the ranger station. And I'll go
Thanks,
try,
Neil.
maybe I'll try to go climb it this summer if it's accessible. I don't know.
Awesome. All right. Well, we've got a question or an answer to that question. I think maybe we've.
Neil.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right, team. Well, that is it for our final book club of this particular series of 2022. Keep an eye out for, oh, I also, sorry, to back up. I wanted to highlight this book. If anybody has, if you're interested about the 19th Amendment, just kind of at a national level, this is a book I read in 2020. It was really great. Really accessible. It was really interesting. It was well written. The library, actually, it's got the library sticker on it. Still, the library did a couple programs around it. So if anybody is just kind of for further reading, if anybody's interested, The Woman's Hour. So there's this one right here. I just wanted to bring that, just show that this morning. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us. This was a great discussion. Thank you so much for being here, for joining us this morning. We'll be back with book club next January. If you have any questions about upcoming museum programs, temporary exhibits, anything like that, you can find all of the museum information on our website. And of course, my contact information is on there as well. So please feel free to reach out. And yeah, I hope you all have a lovely, beautiful Wednesday. Fingers crossed this weather holds out for now. We'll see what happens, huh?
Thank you.
Thanks,
All right.
Michaela.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.